A quiet news day in the NHL offers a self-reflective Tuesday. On the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Steele and I are taking a look under the hood at how this season went in our listener leagues, what worked and what didn't. We'll break it all down on today's episode.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, my friends? Welcome back inside the lab to your daily source for fantasy hockey news and daily degenerate gambling breakdowns, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. You're joined, as always, by my esteemed co-host, Mr. Steele, wrote in on this side of the microphone. It's your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Shout out to the everydayers for holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We see you. We appreciate you. We also see today's sponsor, Sleeper. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Steele, this is a rarity right now in the NHL. It's been a bit of a quiet couple of days, which I think, given the madness of the trade deadline and what we're about to go through for the playoff intensity, I think it makes sense that this is a bit of a lull in the schedule, which offers us up a little bit of an opportunity to first talk about the NHL playoffs are on the horizon, and that means the fantasy playoffs are here. You and I will talk about that very quickly off the jump because you and I are in a lot of leagues. This year for me, not so good in the listener league. You're alive and well in one of them. Let's talk about some angles, what worked, what didn't work, where we're at. And you know me, baby, I got a little bit of a keeper dynasty angle to talk about. It was a final waiver wire in my keeper dynasty league, one that I've been running for 11 seasons, 16 GMs. It's a very serious one. I got a couple of young players that might be worth sacrificing some capital on to head you into next season tip-top shape. Tuesday's bets, Steele, I swear down. We're going to keep today short and sweet. So why don't you just hit me with your overall take on how you're doing in general this time of the year, any tips, advice that you adhere to, and just an overall look in on your seasons.
Yeah, it's been a very up and down season for me personally. I'm in 4 different leagues. So, I'll try to talk mostly about the 2 listener leagues that we're in. But so far, out of the 4 leagues, three out of the 4 leagues, I'm in the playoffs. Currently in the playoffs or heading into the playoffs. So very fortunate for that.
There you go.
Not even going to talk about the casual league because that was an absolute atrocious season on my part. I believe I'm 12th or 13th right now. It's been
I'm not much better. I think I'm 9th, pal. So it's okay.
It's been a very poor season, but thankfully in the competitive league.
Yeah, you're on a heater.
On an absolute heater right now. I believe like 3 weeks ago, I was in 12th place as well. And currently I'm sitting 6th place in a playoff spot. So I've jumped heavily up in the competitive league. And really it's just being active on the waiver wire and finding those key pieces that you and I talk about.
Yes, sir.
Especially in the goalie department for me, because this was the league where I had very poor goalies. I believe I drafted John Gibson, and I can't even remember who else I drafted. My goalies have completely fluctuated and changed. I'm currently rostering Dustin Wolf, Linus Ullmark, and Anthony Stolarz of the Florida Panthers.
Love that. You got creative.
Got very creative in the goalie department. It's even hard with Linus Ullmark because Jeremy Swayman's getting majority of the starts recently. So it's been tough to reach the minimum goalie for each week. But even in our league, 5 ads per week, 75 ads for the entire season. I think really balancing that on a weekly basis, picking and choosing when it's okay to pick up a player or when, okay, if I'm in the lead here, let's just stay complacent maybe. So it's really trying to find that balance. But so far, it's in this competitive league, like I said, it's been a roller coaster, up and down. But I'm going to give a lot of credit to Connor McDavid right here. He's absolutely saved my season.
No kidding.
That's why I was struggling off the top or off the jump of the season. Connor McDavid and the Oilers were very, very bad. And I got to give a shout out to McJesus over there because he's been real hot over the last 3-4 months now.
Answering prayers across the board. That's usually what happens when you get the number one piece in fantasy. But I'll just say this, just number one about this time of the season, Steele. You and I talked a little bit about ease of schedule. I wrote an article about it today. Check that out at Dauber Hockey, by the way. Those are the kind of angles right now that, of course, like if you're in your fantasy playoffs already, That's all you're really looking at. And now is when, of course, your work as a GM to get you here was an important move, important amount of work, but you have to not let your foot off the gas pedal. And that's what I've done myself. You and I talked about it off air yesterday. I haven't been active enough. And look at what happened to you. You got reinvested. You started to pay attention to the waiver wire. You got a little creative and you were rewarded for it. Look, I'm not trying to come up with excuses, but it's another one of those angles that you and I talk about. If you're a committed fantasy person, no matter what sport, if you are committed, you're doing it every single day, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes. And look, I've had a lot going on in my personal life, but it's no excuse. And look, I'm in, I think, 15th out of 16th in the competitive league. I'm in 9th out of 16th in the other one. Thankfully, doing a little bit better in my keeper dynasty league. And I'm in the postseason in one of my other leagues. So I'm in 4 leagues. So I'm doing okay, but I've been a victim of not listening to my own advice, Steele. So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the players that have worked out for you and I, where you're headed for this postseason push. I've made some moves in my keeper dynasty league. I want to talk about some young players that worth keeping your eye on. Giddy up, Steele. It's been a long day. Tuesday's bets coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. We're way past the halfway point in the season, and regardless of where you are in the standings, for fantasy, you could be winning big by playing daily fantasy on Sleeper, the official fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports, especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. What players will help you win 100 times your money? Ovi, McDavid, Crosby, or McKinnon. Just pick whether they go over or under the Sleeper predictions for goals, assists, saves, and more. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're going to check out Locked On Sports today. They've launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on Locked On Sports today. Also, baseball fans everywhere, you got to be tuning in for March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern time for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports today. Again, March 20th. Put it in your calendar, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Be the first to get local insight from MLB local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, it's on March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Locked On Sports Day's 24/7 streaming channel. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Great things ahead for the Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel. Baseball right around the corner, hockey playoffs right around the corner, NBA, NFL trades. I mean, there's so much happening in
Masters.
Sports. Scotty Scheffler with the craziest.
I don't
want to
talk about that.
I'm not going to talk about it, but the Masters as well, right around the corner. This is just a good time for sports all around. But let's continue the conversation of the fantasy hockey leagues, casual and competitive. Flip. Obviously, you're falling a victim to not listening to your own advice here, not staying active on the waiver wire ads.
Not staying active enough in general.
Yeah. What else do you think with your team could have been a little bit better for this season that just transpired?
So actually, I think it's one of the things that I did fairly well in both leagues. And it's one of those things that you and I talk about all the time. And what is it, Steele? It's goaltenders. And it's a very polarizing conversation along with the injury factor. And this is why you and I see eye to eye in a lot of things, because look, one of the things and one of the only reasons I was getting wins this year is because I had a tandem of Adin Hill and Ilya Sorokin in one league. And I know Sorokin wasn't great. And then when cooking, I had Stuart Skinner, Samuel Urson, and Jake Oettinger. So, and I know Jake Oettinger was up and down, and, the purists will say, oh, well, Flip, a couple of those goalies you definitely could have gotten later, or you could have waited. Yeah, I could have. But even look at what happened to you, Steele, and how things worked out. You got active. You got a little bit lucky with some of those moves because you had to scramble. We waited for goaltenders. So I think one of those things that has to be seriously looked at, especially on a year-to-year basis. Maybe this strategy 4 or 5 seasons ago held more water, but never before has the goaltending position been this in flux. 1 goalies, 2 goalies, 3 goalies. How can you predict and tell me that you can wait past the 6th and 7th rounds, and really get an elite goaltender? To me, it's so hard to predict that there's a couple of those horses that, to me, yeah, you got to go after them. Maybe not in the first round, maybe not even in the second, but I wouldn't be going too late on trying to get a number one goaltender, because that's one of the only things that worked out for me, Steele, was I was winning those categories.
And that's where I fell off a lot in many of my leagues. Even go back to last year when I had Thatcher Demko and Jordan Binnington. I thought those two guys were
Which
going to
would
be
have
stellar for
won
me.
you a league this season. So there you go right there.
Exactly. So it was very, I've over the last 2 seasons, I've made very poor decisions or just got very unfortunate with the goaltenders I've drafted. Even this year, I've had to trade for a goaltender in almost every single league.
And there's an element of luck to it all, of course.
Yeah, there's a little bit, but it's also, you're trying to get deals done with other people over text
Most
message.
definitely.
You gotta get something done and try to find a balance of what's fair between two GMs and what each person is looking for. So as much as there is a little bit of luck into it, it does take a little bit of work to get the deals done. But for me personally, again, just like staying active on the waiver wires and picking up those key guys for those categories that you need. Like I've had Marcus Peterson on my roster for the last 2 weeks because he's been producing in the blocks and hits category. So that's something I've needed. And even though he doesn't really do much else for me, that's what I've needed for the time being. And he's produced out there. I've made a couple of trades, Alex DeBrincat, Tom Wilson, like I said, Linus Ullmark at the beginning of the season when I traded Tyler Toffoli. So really just, if your team is struggling, you kind of have to play the hand that you've been dealt, and you got to make some trades there to figure out where you go with your team.
Most definitely. And I think, look, like I said earlier on today's show, when the news is quiet, it offers us a little bit of an opportunity to dig into some of these angles as a fantasy GM that, look, stats, watching hockey, of course. You just also have to have a little bit of general common sense when it comes to what you're doing with your team, especially when it comes to the keeper dynasty side of things, Steele. Yeah. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. We'll talk about Tuesday's bets. I'll just leave it at this.
We can talk about Keeper League right now.
Okay, giddy up, Steele. Thank you. This is why you got to hold me down, pal. Because, look, number one, if you are kind of out of it, there's a lot of leagues that have already probably set their trade deadline and moves might not be available. But if there are, keep up and make sure that you're trying to position your team for next season. And if there's still waiver wire ads to be had, and this is where I wanted to start, I had $65 left in auction dollars, Steele. We get 100 for the whole season. So I really had quite a bit left. It doesn't carry over. And I know a lot of leagues have a similar type of situation. Even if you don't, and you just had ads left, going into the trenches here, and this is what I did with a player named Jackson Lacombe, a defenseman on the Anaheim Ducks, who has been getting top 4 minutes for the last chunk of games. Look, in 58 games, he has 13 points, 49 shots on net, 20 penalty minutes. He is 22 years old. He was a 38th overall draft pick, mid-second to early second rounder. And why not an opportunity on the Ducks? And I started to read into the Ducks. And how about one of the best performers in the AHL this year in Olin Zellweger? Another very interesting name for the Anaheim Ducks. So if you do this research, I started at A, Steele. I started at A and started to dig into these players. Right away, you're going to find fantasy gold. So for Keeper Dynasty, I'm not saying just go out there and add the first player that pops up on the prospect pool. But when it comes to teams like the Ducks, who need young players to eat and fill minutes, and they've got top picks that, especially in Zellweger, have been working their way toward the NHL, this is the time, as an astute fantasy GM, that you start forgetting about this season that went awry, perhaps, and start focusing on what you can do for next season, keepers and otherwise.
Did you pick up Jackson Lacombe off the waiver wire? Is that what you said?
I picked up Jackson Lacombe off the waiver wire because I have a minor slot eligibility, and he still fits.
Yes, I remember that now.
So I'm not swapping out anybody. I'm not necessarily telling you to drop a regular NHLer for Jackson Lacombe, but if you have these options to augment your roster, you don't need to drop a piece, or you do have minor eligibility, which we do. Jackson Lacombe and some of these riskier picks are worth stashing now, and maybe you get some fantasy gold down the road.
Yeah, that is a very good point right there about looking to the future, especially if you're not in a playoff spot in a keeper league right now. That's something that I had to, decide over the last couple of weeks whether or not I start selling off some of my top pieces because yes, I might be in a playoff spot, but I'm in the
Mm.
eighth last position in this keeper league, going up against the top dog who's only lost twice this entire year. So
Yeah, that's
uh,
trouble.
that's very big trouble. Very bad news for me heading into the postseason against the number one place team who went 17-2 on the season.
Mm.
But yeah, so that's something that I was considering whether I wanted to trade some of my keepers from last year, like Zibanejad, Horvat, Robertson,
Ooh.
Hannafin, Gensel, Darnell Nurse, maybe a few goalies out there as well. But I decided to stand tall, keep pat, keep my draft picks, keep my players, and really just hope for the best if I can get by this top seeded guy in the first round of my keeper league.
Hey, the main thing I'm trying to say here, Steele, is head on a swivel, learn from some of the mistakes that I'm pointing out right now for myself, and capitalize on whatever opportunity is in front of you. You said sometimes you got to deal with the cards you've been dealt. And that means just looking ahead. If it is that a keeper situation, like I just brought up, you have options. Maybe not so much if it's a year-to-year league, your goose might be cooked. But if you're also on the edge, perhaps it's not a playoff situation. You just play out the whole league and you have another few weeks here to stack points and you are within striking distance. Waiver wire, ease of schedule, all of these things that you and I have been bringing up over the last couple of weeks, that will take you there. Let's take us to bets right after the break, Steele. I'm ad read ready, baby.
Ad read ready. This episode is also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a registered broker dealer. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit that subscribe, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Before we get to big time bets, I got to give a special shout out to all of our casual and competitive league
Steele.
listener participants for this year. It's been an absolute joy having all of you for our two listener leagues this season.
Yeah.
I sent a message in the chat earlier yesterday. Just congratulations. Thank you so much for all of that. And good luck to everyone who is in a playoff spot or still fighting for a playoff
Classy,
spot
Steele.
right
This
now.
is why I love you, brother. That's
Gotta
classy.
love all the support out there. So shout out to them, and we're gonna show some support with the big time bets. Hopefully, we'll make some money for all of you out there on Tuesday night.
I'm ready.
Many games, very juicy schedule Tuesday night. I'll throw it over to you, Flip. What are your picks for Tuesday night?
First of all, I just got to echo Steele's sentiments for my own sake. Steele can always speak for me on behalf of the podcast. That's why we do this together. But shout out to everybody who is showing interest in the pod, in the fantasy leagues, showing us love on Twitter, showing us love in the DMs, in the reviews. We're just getting started. We just passed 2 years with the pod, and there is so much more coming. We do it for you guys, even though it's sometimes at the sacrifice of my own success, Steele, in some of these listener leagues, because we're always on the go. But I'm not going to make excuse for a bit of a sloppy end of last week for my bets, and I'm back in a big way, baby, because I believe, Steele, and let me just double check the math. 3, that's 9. That's 12. That's 13 games on Tuesday's board. and I'm ready to go. I'm just going to start with my first pick because I have quite a bit to say about these 3 games. Number 1, the Winnipeg Jets are taking on the New York Rangers. This is going to be a good one. And I think, Steele, you've heard this from me before at this time of year, and I think you can already see where I'm going with 2 teams that, number 1, Igor Shesterkin is the hottest goaltender in the NHL, and he back. And that's problems for the Eastern Conference. Number 2, Connor Hellebuck hasn't gone anywhere all year. He's in him. So you know where I'm headed here. Under the number, and I'm going to tease it up to 6.5. It's at 5.5. I see it at 6.5.
I would do the same thing.
I'm going to tease it up to 6.5. 7 of the last 10 have gone under the number between these 2 teams that very much have aspirations for the Stanley Cup. Read into which one is better for your own sake. But I'll say this. They're going to start setting the tone for playoff-like intensity. Steele, you knew that was coming from me. Playoff atmosphere, tight checking, low scoring. Hit me with the under 6.5 between 2 teams that are definitely touting the best goaltenders in the business right now.
Yeah, and I actually really like that you're teasing that up to under 6.5 because even with the special goaltenders out there, you've got mad talent on both sides offensively. You've got 2 studs on the blue line and Josh Morrissey.
Wait.
Adam Fox.
Early Stanley Cup matchup, perhaps, Steele?
Maybe.
No, that's just for degenerate's sake going to get a $5 wager for me because if that happens and you and I just predicted it, I'm going to be upset. But it's not too crazy, is it?
It's not crazy at all. And
it's bold.
I've been seeing people say that if the Winnipeg Jets finish the top of the Central Division, they're most likely going all the way to the Stanley Cup. So there's a lot of faith in Canada with the Winnipeg Jets. That's what they're saying out there. But I agree. Tease it up to under 6.5 because there is a lot of talent in this game. 2 of them being the 2 net miners in Igor Shesterkin and Connor Hellebuck. So I like the under 6.5 in this matchup. I'm keeping my bets very, very simple. I'll rattle off my first 2. First pick. Leafs on the money line against the Philadelphia Flyers, minus 142. I know they just had an embarrassing loss, comeback win for the Carolina Hurricanes in a shootout.
That one sucked.
But the Leafs have been dominating the Flyers of late. Not just of late, 8 straight wins for the Maple Leafs over the Flyers, minus 142, my first pick. Going to my second favorite team here, Minnesota Wild on the money line.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. The odds aren't great, but I'm parlaying these 3 picks together. Wild on the money line against the Anaheim Ducks, minus 215. They've won 9 out of their last 10 games against the Anaheim Ducks.
Oh, yeah, I'm adding that one in a big way. This is why we do this, Steele. Look, you're going to laugh at my lock of the night, but it makes sense. I'll hit you with my second pick because this just one makes me feel good. And as much as I don't like saying the Boston Bruins are cooking and they almost blew it on Saturday night, they're getting closer and closer to clinching home ice advantage throughout the playoffs if they can close on Florida. You know, they're pushing for that top spot, and it's very much within their grasp, and they have a pretty good schedule down the stretch for the most part. Going up against Ottawa is the first big opportunity to smash them. 8 of the last 10 have gone under the number just for the fun sake. But Boston has points in 7 of the last 10 meetings, including 6 victories. I wanted to take them on the puck line just because I think Ottawa has 3 wins in their last 11 games. They only have 4 wins in their last 20 meetings against Boston. But a bunch of those are actually quite close. Yeah. And especially of late, Ottawa has given Boston some trouble. Those are in different situations. Ottawa's goose is fully cooked. The Bruins have a lot to play for, and I don't even care about the head-to-heads so much as those numbers. However, I need a win bad. I need to max win. I want a minus 200 on the Bruins on the money line. Slap it into your favorite parlay and thank me later, Steele. And I'll wrap up with my lock of the night. You can hit me with your take on both, even though I know you're feeling that Bruins take. It's got to be Connor McDavid at home against the Montreal Canadiens. I don't even care if I keep doing this. It makes sense. And you have to now take McDavid at plus or over 1.5 points. Anytime point, there's 0 value. Now, usually over 1.5 anytime points for McDavid is about minus 135, minus 140. So again, not a huge piece of value, but when it comes to how good he's been and how bad the Montreal Canadiens are, especially allowing shots and goals against, give me Connor McDavid at home over 1.5 anytime points. Lock of the night. That one's going to hit, Steele.
Don't gotta fix it if it ain't broken. So
Bang!
go back to the McDavid over 1.5.
Bang!
Absolutely loving the picks for Tuesday night. My lock of the night, a team I've been a fan of over the last stretch of weeks. Nashville Predators on the puck line against the San Jose Sharks at minus 152.
Yeah.
9 straight wins for the Nashville Predators. 7 of those 9 were won by 2 or more goals. So a lot of these picks that I'm throwing at your way, not the best of odds, but parlay them together to juice that odds up there, even with all three of Flip's picks as well. I'm loving the under 6.5 in that Rangers Jets game.
Thank
The
you.
over 1.5 points for Connor McDavid. And of course, the Boston Bruins on the money line. I do believe that it is going to be a close matchup because the Ottawa Senators have played better against the Bruins as of late. But you got to take the Bruins on the money line as well. So I might parlay all 6 of those picks together if possible. I think everybody out there should, throw maybe a toonie or loony, maybe $5 on it, make some money for the week. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, you got to check out Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. They are here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering every single league. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV app. Thank you again so much for tuning in for today's podcast and episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Suck it, Scotty.